In this video, we are going to talk about how do we find the derivative of exponential function, okay? So in the exponential function, you will see x in the exponent, but mainly on this video, we will talk about the derivative of e to the x, okay? We can find the derivative of any exponent, any base with any positive base and any exponent, but we will focus our attention here to the derivative of e to the x. So to find out the derivative of the exponential function, the first thing we will need is we will need to use this formula. We will prove this formula later, okay? In the next section we will prove this formula, but for now we will use this to find out the derivative of fx equals to e to the x. The formula is limit x tends to 0 e to the x minus 1 divided by x. You see that if you plug in 0 here, you will get e to the 0 is 1 minus 1 is 0 over 0, right? You will get 0 over 0 home, but the limit of this will be 1, so we will have to use different formula to do that. But for now, just think this is just a formula, and then we will be proving this later, okay? So find the derivative of fx equals to e to the x. When you find out the formula of any function to find out the derivative, we use the limit formula first, okay? So what is the formula for f prime of x? Then f prime of x is equals to limit, you see that limit h tends to 0, right? Let us write down limit h tends to 0, and then f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. That's what you get, right? So what does that mean? Since f of x equals to e to the x, then it will be e to the x plus h, meaning x is replaced by x plus h minus e to the x divided by h. You see that? So this can be written as this is equals to limit h tends to 0. So how can we simplify the first term? You can write this as e to the x times e to the h, right? Minus e to the x divided by h. What did I do this? Because if you combine these two terms, since they have the same base, and since there is a product term, you can write a single base, and then it will be x plus h. Okay, the exponent will be added. This is the laws of exponent. Okay. Now what I want to do next is I want to factor the e to the x out. What you get is e to the h minus 1 divided by h. Okay. So now since the e to the x does not have h in it, so what I want to do is e to the x, pull that out. It is like a constant for h, okay? And then take the limit h tends to 0, e to the h minus 1 over over just h, right? E to the h minus 1 over h. Now look at this formula. It says if there is a limit x tends to 0, e to the x minus 1 over x, same form, right? Limit h tends to 0, e to the h minus 1 over h. So if you plug that, so this quantity is basically 1, right? So this is basically 1. So what you get finally, it is basically e to the x. So you can write this as like this, right? Derivative of e to the x with respect to x, right, is equals to e to the x. When they match, you see that? When that e to the exponent and the derivative with respect to that x and x match, then the derivative is e to the x. So e to the x is the only function whose derivative is itself. You see that? Okay. Now tell me what will be the derivative in case of the chain rule. If they don't match, the extra thing you will do is you need to multiply by u prime, right? So it is like e to the u, because the derivative of e to the u is e to the u times, since they don't match, you see that, then it will be u prime, that is du over dx, right? So e to the u times the u prime. So we will see some examples, and then you will be clear, okay? So here y equals to x squared times e to the x plus 7 times e to the x plus e to the t squared over 6. You see that there is a product there, so it is like f times the g. What is the product rule? It is f prime times g plus f times g prime, right? And then here it is like e to the u, right? You see that this is like a e to the u. So e to the t squared over 6 is the exponent of u. So what is the derivative? E to the u times the u prime, right? So we'll use this formula to find out the derivative here. So y prime will be, f prime is 2x times e to the x, right? And then plus f is x squared times the g prime is the derivative of, this is like f, this is like g, right? So the derivative of e to the x is e to the x itself, plus 7 times the derivative of e to the x. We found that it is e to the x itself. So let me write down f prime of x here, right? So it is e to the x plus, so here the derivative of e to the u is e to the u times u prime. So e to the u times the u prime, right? So let us plug in those values. So 2x e to the x, because 2x times e to the x, plus x squared times e to the x, you can write e to the x, plus 7 e to the x plus e to the t squared over 6, right? And then times, what is the derivative of t squared over 6? So, oh, by the way, this should be x squared, I'm sorry. So the derivative of e to the x squared over 6 is, basically, it is like a e to the u, right? So e to the u times the u prime. But what is e to the u? E to the u is e to the x squared over 6 times the derivative of x squared over 6, right? X squared over 6 to the prime. So what will be the final answer then? So it will be 2x e to the x plus x squared times e to the x plus 7 times e to the x plus e to the x squared over 6 times the derivative of, so 1 over 6, you can pull that out, and the derivative of x squared will be 2x, right? So let us simplify and then factor out. If there is any common factor between the terms, we will take that out. This has e to the x, e to the x, e to the x. Let me take the e to the x out. What is left is, there is x squared plus there is 2x plus 7 and then plus e to the x squared over 6 and then times, you divide that by, divide this by 2, divide this by 2 will be 3, right? So 1/3 times 1/3 x, or you can write 1/3 x times e to the x squared over 6. You can do that way. That is perfectly fine. Okay, let us see this example. Find the derivative of y equals to natural log of 1 plus e to the x over 1 minus e to the x. So in case of the natural log, we know the formula to split this quotient of the natural log, right? So you can write this way. So y equals to natural log of the top 1 plus e to the x, right? And then minus natural log of 1 minus e to the x. You can split that this way. Okay. Now you can think this as like natural log of u and then natural log of v, like that. So do you remember the derivative of natural log of u? What is the derivative of natural log of u? It is 1 over u times the u prime, right? From the previous sections. So how do I do that? It will be 1 over u times the u prime minus 1 over v times the v prime, right? Let us plug in those values. 1 over 1 plus e to the x times, what is the derivative of 1? Is 0 plus e to the x, derivative has e to the x itself. So it's just e to the x minus 1 over 1 minus e to the x times, what is the derivative of 1 minus e to the x? Derivative of v is 0 minus e to the x. So it will be negative e to the x, right? So if you simplify that, you will get basically e to the x over 1 plus e to the x, right? And then minus is plus basically, because minus times negative e to the x is just e to the x over 1 minus e to the x. If you want to combine these two, how do you write that? If you see that this is like, it is like a plus b and then a minus b format, right? If you multiply that, what do you get? You will get basically a square minus b square, 1 minus e to the x square, right? And then what do you get here? You can basically pull that e to the x outside, okay? E to the x. If you pull that e to the x outside, what will left? If you pull that e to the x outside, let me show you that. If you pull that e to the x outside, then what is left is 1 over 1 plus e to the x and then plus 1 over 1 minus e to the x. That's what you will get. You see that? If you pull that e to the x out and then you combine these basically here. So after you do that, you will, how to combine that? You just do the cross multiplication, right? So it will be 1 minus e to the x times 1, because that will be 1 times 1 is 1 and then minus 1 minus e to the x. So it will be 1 minus e to the x, right? So 1 minus e to the x and then there is a plus sign in the middle, and that times that will be 1 plus e to the x plus e to the x. If you simplify that, what do you get? You cancel that positive e to the x and negative e to the x. So basically 1 plus 1 is 2. So basically the final answer will look like this. 2 over, let me use the dark color there, 2e to the x over 1 minus e to the 2x. That's what you will get. That is the final answer. Okay, so what did I do here? It is like a square is 1, and then minus b square is e to the x square. E to the x square is e to the 2x. Basically x and 2 will multiply. Okay, and there these two are cancelling out, so 1 plus 1 is 2 e to the x. So this is the final answer for that.